Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us on this beautiful summer day we've got here. We're just outside of Ann Arbor, Michigan, so it's a little bit warm, and like I said, summer's in full swing now. So with that, what a great time to start thinking about the next season, fall, of course, and going back to school a little bit. You know, this year, the thing on everybody's mind is what's the fall going to look like? What our campus is going to look like when you go back to class. And a lot of people are starting to consider gap years or alternatives. So this week on Zooming In, we thought it would be great to bring in a couple of people who know a thing or two about that. We've got Emily Zislis at the University of Pennsylvania, who had previously taken a gap year and is now one of their gap year student ambassadors. And we've also got Chloe Anagnos, who's an author at the James G. Martin Center for Academic Renewal. And we're also excited to have Sarah Gladstone Smith with the UNC's Gap Year program, and also who is a board member of the Gap Year Association. So thank you, ladies, for joining us. And of course, I'm Spencer with Fourth View.
And I'm Dylan, Fourth View as well.
So to kick it off, is this the year of the gap year? Emily, let's start with you.
Oh, and also before you start, Emily, we also just want to plug in that this is part of our Return My Semester coverage. We've been talking about how schools have been basically doing this hodgepodge of like refund policies, and we've been trying to track through FOIA how are universities talking about refunds behind closed doors, pay cuts, and if they're taking kind of reductions in salaries. And so this is kind of a continuation of that coverage and how students are going to be seeing the dynamics playing out between universities and themselves. So sorry about that. Just wanted to, yep.
All right. Well, thank you so much for the introduction. To answer that, I will start by just talking a little bit about, my own gap year and what a gap year could look like. I think a lot of people are concerned that a lot of gap year options involve travel, and since that's limited, that the typical gap year wouldn't look, the same as it had in the past. But I definitely am of the opinion that there are still a lot of things that students can do to learn in an untraditional way and really still get outside of their comfort zones and get a lot of different types of experiences, even with the limitations we have. So I'll just jump right in. I took a gap year 3 years ago. I'm now a rising senior at Penn in Philly, and I started by working for the State Department as a cultural ambassador and translator for 20 Central American students. And then some of my other work experience throughout the year included interning at an infectious disease clinic in Salvador de Bahia, Brazil. And I also worked as a project supervisor for a nonprofit intercultural exchange program called Amigos de las Americas. And I worked in indigenous Mayan communities in the Yucatan in Mexico. And then to also talk about like the learning opportunities I had that didn't involve school, but I was still using my brain and expanding my knowledge about different things. So I was involved in a few different opportunities. One was Where There Be Dragons with Indonesia, in Indonesia, and that was an experiential learning program with a conservational focus, where I lived with host families, traveled to a few different islands, and I was also able to learn elementary Indonesian when I was there. And then also when I was in Brazil, I took intensive Portuguese classes. And then at the end of my gap year, I attended a 5-day silent meditation retreat in Barre, Massachusetts. And then the last kind of category of my gap year was solo travel. So I was backpacking around Hong Kong, Costa Rica, Panama, Nicaragua, and I hiked part of the Camino de Santiago in Spain. So of those things, definitely it's very possible to continue to work and volunteer. There are many valuable internship opportunities that are happening remotely that, I expect to continue to be occurring in the fall, in the spring. Um, I have lots more to say on different opportunities that are available, but yeah, that's the general overview of my gap year.
I was going to say, you literally, it sounds like you went all around the world. Now, did you plan all of that out ahead of time, or did you operate a little bit more on the fly?
Yeah, so I definitely had some overarching goals. I knew that I wanted to focus on language learning, and I wanted to get some work experience, test out a few different career paths that I'd been thinking about. But I didn't plan the spring semester. I started with Where There Be Dragons, which was a guided program. And then from there, it was in that program, I learned more how to do independent travel, how to plan my own itineraries, how to essentially find host families. There's just like a lot, of course, that's involved in independent travel, but that was like really good stepping stone. And then from there, I went on to identify some other opportunities. But I did try to keep it open and not lock myself into any one thing, because I predicted that my interest would evolve over the course of the year.
Excellent. Now, when you were planning it out and when you first approached the university about the proposal, what was their reaction?
So Penn was very hesitant about gap years, I would say, a few years ago. I would say that my year was probably the first class where they started to become more receptive of the idea. When I came to the university, there was no gap year association or anything like that. But then the following year, they elected an individual to essentially be like a mentor for individuals who had taken a gap year and planned different meetups. So I think that I definitely took a gap year at a time where colleges were starting to transition and starting to think, what are the benefits that taking a gap year could have for their students.
Well, I think that's kind of a great segue maybe over to Sarah for a moment. I know it sounded like you had had a gap year experience on your own before getting involved in UNC. And I'm kind of curious, what was your experience like? And when did UNC decide that they needed to be supportive of gap years?
Absolutely. Thank you again for having us here today. And I saw a lot of similarities with Emily's story there. So I did not take a gap year in the traditional sense of what we call a gap year now, which typically is between high school graduation and starting your first year of college. A lot of students are doing them after undergrad, and that was my experience. So I actually lived in Ireland for a year, and then I did grad school in Ireland. I loved it so much. So that to me was just an opportunity to get out and see the world. Try something new, try something a little bit untraditional for myself and for my family and where I come from. And it was life-changing, and it absolutely expanded my mind, my perspective, being in an environment where, although we sometimes think of Europe and we think, oh, it's not that different. It was absolutely different for me. And learning to thrive in a new environment, a new culture has paid off tenfold for me. And then when coming back to the U.S., UNC actually started our GAP program in 2011. It was very small, and we were only the second program in higher education at the time. Princeton was ahead of us by a year, I think. And so we were the first in public education. And we started out very small, supporting 5 students a year, and we're now up to this year we're doing 10, but we're actually on our way to supporting 21 a year on a full scholarship to do a gap year experience. And it hasn't always been easy. UNC really has evolved in their thinking about the value of a gap year and what a student who has had that chance to explore and to grow, what they can bring back to the university. And so, it was not easy in the beginning to set it up. You know, it wasn't really common in higher education. And as Emily said, the last few years is when we've really seen it kind of take off on a more, you know, nationwide perspective. I think also my time in Ireland opened my eyes in a lot of ways, because gap years are very popular in Europe, and they have been for decades. So, you know, we're by no means, you know, the first to really move into the gap space. And so they've been doing it for so long and so well. And students, you know, have really come back to the university space and thrived after having had either a year of doing service in another country, or maybe even doing a summer on a, you know, in Ireland, a J1 visa, visiting another country and really having that cross-cultural interaction. So, you know, it's been really interesting to see how the movement has progressed over the past 10 years, and really starting from kind of, you know, very small programs to what we see today. And they're really kind of popping up all over the US. And you mentioned my work with the Gap Year Association. That's been really informative as well. I work kind of with the higher ed community, and you know, I frequently get requests to have conversations about setting up programs, and how to talk to administration about the value of a gap year and what these students can bring to the community after having had that gap experience.
Yeah, now have you seen that attitude change this year going into fall? It seems like there's a lot of different discussions about some schools thinking, oh, that could be a good opportunity to have students kind of doing something else besides contributing to the crowding, if you will, on campus. And there's other schools that have been very resistant and saying, no, we don't think there's going to be opportunities. We think it'll wind up just with students staying home. So I'm curious what the response you've seen has been.
That's a great question. I've definitely seen two sides of the argument. You know, my work with GYA, we have seen an exponential increase in traffic on the website, particularly looking for our domestic options. You know, again, going back to the program I work with, we are the Global Gap Year Fellowship, but are not going to be operating globally this year. We are going to be doing domestic service unless there's travel warnings are lifted for the spring, but for sure the fall they will be domestic. And there definitely has been a huge push kind of nationwide. Students are starting to get creative and think about what are alternatives to physically being on campus when that's really not going to be an option in some places, or really not a meaningful experience in some places. But there are universities that are pushing back and saying, no, we need you to come here. We need you to, you know, I don't want to necessarily venture a guess as to why, but different universities have different policies, you know, that saying, well, kind of the old school thought of a gap year of, oh, you're going to take time away, you're not going to come back. And that's a concern that I think a lot of administrators may be having. But I would push back on that, honestly. My experience has been, and again, I do work with a university affiliated program, but my experience has been once a student has the opportunity to explore, to learn about their passions, they come back reinvigorated. And they're much more focused. They have the skills they need to thrive in college. And honestly, retention is incredible with our GAP students. You know, they are finishing in sometimes less than 4 years, and they're very focused. So I would push back on that, but that is something in kind of I would say an old school way of thinking, that if a student takes time away, they're not going to come back. And I would also say that to those who say, well, maybe they're just going to be at home, there's some really great online options that are popping up in the GAP community. You know, I would also say that something that we've been working hard as a GAP community is making these opportunities accessible. You know, the GAP year has, in a lot of cases, been seen as something that only folks who have certain socioeconomic status could really take advantage of. But there are really great programs out there that are trying to make these opportunities accessible. Obviously, our program, it's a full scholarship for all of our students. So we try to make it so that it doesn't cost them any money. There are programs like Global Citizen Year, who have an online academy that's a sliding scale based on your financial you know, ability to be able to pay for something. So there are some really great programs that if students aren't able to go into the community, that are still available for them to really have some structure. They're not sitting at home doing nothing, and they're really still making meaning out of this year.
Excellent. Oh, Chloe, I know you've definitely got some experience in the private sector, so I'm curious, what experiences outside of the classroom and what skills do you see that students can take the opportunity to kind of work on over the next year if they're trying to be more focused?
Sure, and I think Emily and Sarah really hit the nail on the head. Right now, a lot of employers are looking for students who can pivot in a post-COVID-19 world. We're seeing a lot of folks that I know. I'm still about, I don't want to date myself, but I'm about 6 years out of college and out of undergrad. And a lot of my folks and friends that are expats that live in South America are kind of in between that stage where they're not sure if they want to get a post-grad degree. So they're teaching English online. And are getting a ton of experience. And as I've written for the James G. Martin Center in North Carolina, there's a lot of opportunity out there to teach online, whether it's through programs like, I think there's one called Whale, there's one called VipKid. And what's kind of crazy is that there's so much opportunity, especially for unfortunately, the students that have been homebound in China and in parts of Asia because of this virus. So there's a lot of opportunity to teach English, to get different certifications, to really help our global community right now when most folks are stuck inside because of this pandemic. But also the need for folks who can effectively market and communicate is higher than ever. I can't tell you the number of online certifications that you can get through LinkedIn or through Google Analytics or through HubSpot. There are always going to be these programs out there that you can take for free. You can take classes for free. I know Yale, Harvard, a lot of Ivy League schools have different courses that you can take completely free, that you can really just bolster your resume, that you can add to your LinkedIn profile, and that you can even, if you're interested in freelancing, if a lot of students are like, hey, I'm ready this summer to use some of these marketing skills or some of my teaching skills, there's a lot of opportunity to tutor, to create graphics for small businesses, family-owned businesses, for social media. I really think that the sky's the limit. So we're in this kind of situation where, although this pandemic has obviously cost lives, jobs, and livelihoods across the world, we're seeing a lot of opportunity for young people to pivot, much like after the 2008 recession. So if there are students out there that are listening that are ready to join the private sector, or they're ready to try to find some type of way to support themselves and maybe try to make a little bit of income during that gap year, now's the time to do that.
I'm curious too, what do you see employers saying about somebody who's either taken a gap year or who's taken a non-traditional path to their education?
They don't care. It's so funny, but in my experience, I've never been asked to provide a copy of my college or high school diploma. The majority of employers, at least in my experience here in the Midwest and out in Washington, D.C., are more interested to see what your experience is, what's on your LinkedIn profile, and what your references have to say about you, as opposed to your college education. So I feel like and again, higher ed is not for everyone. If there's the opportunity to go out and learn by getting your hands dirty, then by all means go ahead and do that. But unless you're really interested in some type of specialized field like teaching or medicine, if you're more interested in going into marketing or media or even entrepreneurship, most employers aren't going to care necessarily about your college degree. They're more interested in your experience and your willingness to work, to get your hands dirty, and to take direction. So I think having that gap year experience and saying I took intensive courses and I learned a new language, or I learned how to manage volunteers, or I learned how to manage students thousands of miles away while I was teaching them English and teaching them this skill is a lot more impressive than saying, oh yeah, I got an A+ in marketing 101. That's been my experience. And when I hire freelancers, I'm more interested in seeing, okay, do you have the Adobe Suite certification? Then what did you get in these 101 classes? So I think that's kind of the shift that we've been seeing in the last 5 years because of the sharing economy, because of all of these courses that are now available online. And I think that the more we go kind of down this road in remote and e-learning, we're going to see maybe more students who get an associate's degree instead of a traditional 4-year degree. And we're really going to see the workforce just expanded because of the pandemic.
Well, I know last week the federal government drew a little bit of attention to that because they've made the comments that they are now going to prioritize some skills-based certifications over 4-year degrees. Now that was something new. Sarah, do you see a lot of feedback from the kind of community outside of the university on the program, on students who have taken other paths?
Absolutely. So yeah, obviously we are tied to a higher education institution, and our students are required to come back for at least a year. And we've been fortunate enough that the vast majority of our students have actually come back and finished. But I would agree with Chloe on the fact that, I don't think the degree matters as much, and really these extra opportunities and these opportunities to develop skills and get your hands dirty and get out into the real world. Just my own observations and anecdotes of students applying for internships, that I can see a really, a very positive trend with our students who have done something like a gap year. Again, that's the space that I occupy, but just, an anecdote is I had a young lady who took a gap year with us, and, she wanted to go to law school, and she, in her interview for some of the top law schools in the country, she said she spent her entire interview talking about her gap year. That's what they wanted. They said, we see your test scores, we see, you got what you need, but, we've got thousands of kids vying for these very limited spots. Tell us why you're different. And she went into great detail about, she taught civics and economics in a school in India. And so she talked about that and her experience and what it was like to be in a cross-cultural environment. And, obviously I'm not talking to the Harvard admissions panel, but I can venture a guess that, that experience really set her apart. So, it's not enough anymore to have those high test scores and those high qualifications. It really makes all the difference to have done something a little bit different, and to set yourself apart. And again, for us, that's that cross-cultural service experience. But I agree with Chloe, like having the opportunity to get certifications, to add things to your resume and your LinkedIn, now's the time to do it. And this is a great opportunity. So that's just my own anecdotal experience. And again, I do operate in a higher ed environment, but I would also push back on that kind of preconceived notion that you have to go to the degree is the thing that makes the difference. I think in a lot of cases it helps, but those extra things really push you over the top.
Yeah. And Emily, I know you're still in school, but how do you think that your gap year has shaped kind of your continuation of your education, or what you're planning on doing next?
Well, when I took a gap year, I was pretty sure I wanted to study public health, and it completely changed my major because when I interned in an infectious disease clinic, I realized that wasn't really my thing. Like, that was kind of my dream. So I think, there's internship experience to find out what you like, but then also to find out what you don't like. So that was really helpful. And then also being in many like cross-cultural environments and living with host families, I definitely grew a passion for anthropology. I didn't know that the major actually existed though. until like probably halfway through my gap year. I was looking through some courses on Penn's website and found it. And I was like, wow, like that looks pretty perfect. That aligns really well with what I want to do. So I think there's definitely something to be said for just the mental space. I know that this country and this culture is very, very focused on productivity, but I think one of the best things that a gap year has to offer is just space, time and space with nothing really planned and not really productive at all, to just kind of think and do some introspection and find out like what you like without all these different voices from society kind of telling you what to do. So I definitely think this whole fear of students just sitting at home, like I think of course you don't want the entire year to be like that, but it can be healthy for sure to have some time off. It's truly just off.
Oh, and anecdotally, it's kind of been amusing over the past couple months. I'm sure you guys have seen it too, in talking to people who were used to going into an office or going to school 8 hours a day. All of a sudden, when that's kind of stripped away and they're sitting there going, oh, I have to manage my own time. It's amusing to see how some people thrive and a lot of people are kind of lost, going, gee, how do I structure my day now? And I think it's a skill that we really weren't prioritizing, but especially going forward, if this is going to be a bit of the new normal, it all of a sudden is far more important that people are able to do that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I'm curious, are there any kind of particular traits that you see, whether they're in the programs that students pursue or in the students themselves, that really make the difference between somebody who's basically does an okay gap year versus somebody who really comes away with an exceptional story and it really has an impact on them? Maybe Sarah, we start with you.
Absolutely. I'm just sitting here reflecting on some of our students who've really, grown exponentially, and just trying to delineate maybe what are some of those key qualities. I think for us, what we really look for when we're selecting it, there's no, magic formula. We're really looking for growth potential. There is a certain level of maturity that we are hoping is kind of an underlying piece. Maturity also grows during a gap year, but for us, our students do go in what we consider a normal year independently and into another culture and another context. But we look for growth potential. We look for passion. It doesn't have to be the same passion that they started their gap year with that they come out with, but we do look for that spark and that interest. Open to new opportunities. And often the students that we select have never left their home community. And we got a lot of pushback from folks early in our program saying those aren't the type of students who want this. Those aren't the type of students who will do well. And I would say you're wrong. Those are the type of students who are primed and ready to flourish and to really thrive in a space that is non-traditional at this point in their life. And those are the students who come back and they become ambassadors in their own communities of you don't have to go directly into a four-year university or directly into a job, that there are alternatives and there are other things that you can do. And so I would push back on when folks tell me, oh, there's a certain type of student that is really cut out for this, and just say, no, there could be a student who's traveled extensively or not. It's really that growth potential, that openness to new opportunities, a certain level of maturity and kind of being able to manage your time. But again, that's a learned trait as well. And I would say those are kind of the key things that we look for when we're selecting our students. And, we do have a service component to our fellowship. So we are looking for a dedication to service in some contexts, and that can look different for lots of folks. But that is something that's really important as well. But I would also echo what Emily said about this is a great time for students to try something out, to see if it is the right career. We have I wish I could tell you how many students we have that came in pre-med and then maybe did some work in public health or in another context and said, nope, this is not for me. I want to be a social worker, or I want to do environmental conservation, or, and this is a great chance to try that out. Have one this year. I'm really excited. Is one of our men, and he's going to get his EMT certification during this time, and he's going to use this as a chance to really get ahead in his career, add some credentials to his resume, and also test it out, and see if that's really what he wants to devote a lot of time, energy, and money to. So that's kind of my answer for that.
Emily, maybe what have you seen in some of your peers that distinguishes the top tier stories versus others?
I think that the students who feel that they're able to embrace the uncertainty and not necessarily plan out their whole year move for move, end up really using it as a chance to explore instead of just trying to fill the time. I think it's important to, be okay with making a mistake and, going and doing something and not liking it and having to change directions for sure. That said, I've also seen a lot of my peers who ended up doing year-long guided programs did get a lot out of that as well. So I think it definitely depends on the student. But one thing I would definitely say is it is important to develop the multiple intelligences during the gap year, since during your traditional education, there aren't so many opportunities to do that. So it could be things like music or living with a host family, working with your hands, like carpentry, organic farming, picking up some craft. I mentioned language learning is a really great one, service learning. I've also seen a lot of students really go deeply into the arts. I know a girl who went and basically studied at the Cordon Bleu chef school. I've seen students who go and get yoga certifications. The dance teachers volunteer in the movement arts generally, learn martial arts. And then there's the whole just self-taught knowledge. So yeah, there's online courses and there's reading and just teaching yourself lots of different things. So I think overall, I would just say it's important to get a broad mix of learning and then also continue to use your brain during the year just to make the transition back into school not so jarring.
Yeah. Chloe, I'm kind of curious in particular, what skills, this is a little bit broadening of the question, but what skills do employers need out of young people more? And basically, are those things that people can work on throughout a gap year?
I think the biggest thing right now is flexibility. And I mentioned being able to pivot in the course of a global pandemic. And I think the biggest thing that employers are looking for right now are young students or folks that just graduated from college who can pivot, who can maybe start out working remotely, who can take direction, who can have that self-discipline right now as they're graduating, because in a lot of places across the U.S. and across the world, we're not at that sense of normalcy yet. At least here in Indianapolis, we're not at 100% capacity for any type of business. A lot of office buildings are still operating at about 20 to 25%. So I think being flexible and being able to have that self-discipline is what employers are looking for right now. But I would also say for students who are maybe looking into gap years, who are looking into, should I get a certification? Should I get my EMT certification? Should I go to a 2-year or a 4-year college or university program? I think the biggest thing that a lot of students need to keep in mind, and I think this is just a central part of American culture, is that you don't have to have everything figured out right away, right? And I'm sure, Sarah, working with students, that's something that a lot of freshmen, they come in and they're like, well, I'm pre-med, I have to be pre-med because that's what I said I was going to be. And it's like, hey, if it's not for you, it's not for you. I would rather that young people figure that out ahead of time before they spend a bunch of time and money. Maybe they take that summer to get their CNA license, realize that maybe healthcare isn't their thing, maybe marketing or teaching isn't their thing. That's fine. But it's important to really go through and figure out what you like, what you don't like. Maybe that's a little more important, is figuring out what you don't like. And it sounds so cliche, but figuring out who you are as a person and what your likes and dislikes are when it comes to your career path, volunteering, or even just hobbies and extracurriculars. That's what college and the higher education process is all about. It's learning, it's growing, it's expanding your worldview. And as cliche as it is, that's what I would hope that most young people can get out of this time. Even though it's scary and it's exciting, it's very important.
Well, and speaking of pivots, being flexible and whatnot, at this point, I think maybe we'll kind of open it up for some questions to the audience if there's anything out there. And while we're waiting for those to come in, I'll bounce around a little bit of an idea that we've been having here at Fourth View. You know, with all these students considering gap years, one of the things that we've been seeing is, okay, how can we perhaps help get involved in this? We've been bouncing around the idea of maybe like an immersion program with a digital media startup, which we are, for students who might be interested in that. Or, you know, so many students take the choice to blog or document their travels and tribulations during their alternative pathways. Maybe there's a way that we can help them get that in front of a broader audience or kind of create some higher quality content with it. So I'm curious what you guys think students need the most help with. Sarah?
It's a good question.
I see all of the faces going, what?
Interesting. You know, I think I can think of a couple of students off the top of my head who would love to have a way to really broaden their opportunity to tell their stories. You know, something that we work a lot with them in our program is, how do you share your, not only kind of your life experience, but also the time during this non-traditional opportunity to explore and to try something new. And some of them are incredibly talented writers. And you know, we have a blog on our website and we have assignments that they complete, but you know, I'd love for them to find a broader audience and to find a larger space to share those stories. And again, as this movement is growing, and I think it will continue to grow, I really hope that just, you know, beyond this time, that will continue to grow in this non-traditional space, that those stories will become more prevalent. But yeah, I think that would definitely be something a few of my students would be interested in, is sharing that experience and sharing that their you know, what they went through and their growth and how they've changed, and really encourage others to do the same.
Emily, I'm curious, looking back, did you happen to document your experiences? And then second of all, what do you think would have been helpful for you in general?
So I really didn't, I blogged a little bit when I was in Indonesia. And then I did a lot of journaling throughout the year, but never really like published it anywhere. I think definitely like I didn't know of any opportunities to publish blogs besides like creating my own. So I definitely would think that students would really benefit from like a Fourth View platform. Especially, I would say that while there are a lot of internship opportunities out there, like at least in my own experience, currently there aren't too many employers that are willing to hire gap year students that have just graduated from high school for writing, I would say. I think that there's a difference, right, between getting like hired as a journalist and like as a journalist intern. I think that generally employers are looking for a very high caliber. And I'm currently working as a journalist, but this is the first summer that I was able to get that job. So I think like a platform like Fourth View would be really awesome. And I'm sure there would be a lot of students like me who would have really liked to have that opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we're kind of thinking about is because our format is to get multiple perspectives on stuff, just as students are traveling around, whether it's in the US or abroad, they're obviously seeing some fascinating things that are certainly changing their own minds and opinions. Maybe that would be something that they'd be interested in sharing, and then putting that alongside some other people who are in the community or some of our own reporting that's already going on.
Well, I'm curious, Emily, were you offered compensation anyway? Just because I know, like, for my study abroad, we were paid, I don't know, like $50 or whatever per blog post, I think, for the university or the program.
So I didn't have to write anything for Penn, but that's because it wasn't like an official program at that point.
Mm-hmm.
When I went on this Where There Be Dragons program, we did have to write a few blogs for them. But no, we weren't compensated for doing so.
Okay. And then I guess I'm also kind of curious, where do you see people hearing about these programs? How does the research process kind of go? Chloe, maybe you'd be able to offer from outside the school environment, where do people go to look for different alternatives?
So the biggest alternative that I can think of right now, specifically for high school students, is the Praxis program. Praxis, Praxis. That's more of a internship type of program that pairs students who are right out of high school, or maybe they're juniors and seniors, with an internship or some type of apprenticeship with a professional in their chosen field. So for example, a lot of folks that do the Praxis program, I know they do digital media, coding, they work for different small businesses, some startups, and the goal is to get that person hired in that field within, I think, 6 to 12 months. So it's really a fast-paced boot camp. But it's a really great resource for students who might not be interested in a traditional 4-year degree, which is fine, but it places them with their interests. So I'm aware of Praxis. I know a lot of folks who have gone through the program and who have really flourished and have enjoyed it. I would say that's probably one of the best places to start if you're interested in kind of a non-traditional program to really get you into the workforce. One thing I did want to point out quickly, though, about digital media and writing, I think something that's important for students, especially as they're approaching the end of their high school years, or even if they're in college, is creating a personal brand and harnessing that brand and harnessing their story on platforms like LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and even TikTok. TikTok is so popular right now. But Sarah and Emily, I think especially for your students, Sarah, I think that's a place where publishing on LinkedIn can not only help them get their story out there and share what they've learned throughout this gap year program, but that's a place where they can really start to cultivate an audience. And maybe they do that on Fourth View, maybe they write for different blogs, travel blogs that are out there, maybe they start their own, but trying to cultivate an online persona and that personal brand is only going to help them in the long run, especially during the hiring process, because folks like myself love to see, oh, you've created content, fantastic. Here's all of this other content that I need created. So kind of like I've said, I'm kind of beating a dead horse, but I feel like there is just so much opportunity out there that this is really the time for young people to shine.
Looks like we've got a couple of questions too.
Yeah, I just want to make sure, either Sarah or Emily didn't want to answer, but yeah, so Kristen actually was asking, and it kind of goes back a little bit to, well, actually, I'll get to kind of Lanny's first and then kind of go back to Kristen's because it's a little bit of a rewind. But Lanny was asking, are gap year experienced students submitting their experiences to any blogs or websites, or where can you kind of read more about that? And then also, Kristen's was, what does planning for a gap year entail? Like, how would you recommend kind of planning that out a bit?
Sarah?
I can hop in. Yeah, happy to hop in on that one, on both of those actually. So as far as where students are submitting, we don't have anywhere that, but aside from our own personal platform, that they're required to submit. I've got a few students actually who just returned from a gap year who I really think have what it takes to really be published in other contexts. And so I'm going to be encouraging them, and maybe fourth view is an option. But finding some of those.
Thank you.
Finding some of those spaces to encourage our students to get their voices and perspectives out. So at this point, we aren't requiring that, but I do have some on our own personal website, and that's something that we're thinking about pivoting. What we require and moving forward. And then as far as planning, and I know Emily's got a lot of experience in this as well, but what does planning entail? So for us, we, since we are a structured program with a cohort, we actually do what we call our Summer Institute, which this year will be online. Typically, it's 2 weeks that we bring students together over the summer to UNC Chapel Hill, and it's both a combination of community building and cohort building as well as planning. So in a typical year, half of our students self-design a gap year and half of our students join a program. So we're trying to reach as many students as possible. For a lot of our students, the self-design is exactly what they want. They want to have that freedom and that flexibility. And as Emily said earlier, a gap year can go lots of different directions, and it can often change midway. You may think you go in having this great idea of a planned out gap year, and then something happens and you can kind of pivot. So I really encourage flexibility, and not necessarily having to stick to a plan that you may have created 6 months earlier when you were arguably a different person. So for us, we do encourage them to put together a proposal. So we give them a structure, and that in that we're looking for them to create goals and objectives for their gap year. So what are you trying to get out of this gap year, and to really start there. Focus less on the internship at the moment and really focus deep into what your goals are. Is it language learning? Is it building out your resume and your LinkedIn profile around marketing? Is it figuring out what you're passionate about? Trying out, I want to try out 4 different things that I think I might be interested in, but I'm not sure. Is it learning to be independent? Is it learning to do things for yourself? If you've never lived anywhere but with your parents, it might be learning to cook and to do laundry for yourself. It might be wanting to learn about people who are different from you. So there's lots of different goals and objectives, and we really try to get our students to kind of narrow in on a few of those, and then from that we build out the broader gap year plan. So if it's a language learning piece that's really important to them, it's Spanish, then we start to, again, in a different year when travel is a possibility, we would then focus in on countries where Spanish is the primary language and work our way out. We also look at, because it is a service-based gap year, looking at passion areas for our students. So if they're interested in access to education, youth development, water, alleviating hunger, things like that. And then we kind of look at our own database of possibilities as well as cross-referencing with other websites and other platforms that would help us. I don't know if you want me to go ahead and answer the next question that I kind of see Lanny asked, but I think it's related about kind of where to find out more about educational opportunities. I encourage our students to use the Gap Year Association. It's really grown in the past few years, and there is a search function on it. There's also if they are interested in a more structured program, there's basically a certification process that a lot of the programs go through to make sure that they're safe, that they've got, they hold certain ideals, within the structure of their program. So these have been vetted and are good quality programs. So I would encourage engaging with that platform. It's the GYA for short, the Gap Year Association. It's definitely, it's not the end all be all, but there are some really great opportunities, both domestic and abroad, in that space. And so we use that as well in our program for students to connect that way. So whether it be Dragons, Amigos de las Americas, all of those would be our Gap Year Association vetted organizations that really have a great reputation of safety and but also growth and great opportunities for students. So I'll leave it there and maybe let Emily or Chloe hop in, but those are some of my thoughts.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything that Sarah just said. And I would just reiterate that it's important to have goals, and then also maybe think like thematically, so like work experience, language experience, domestic travel experience, hobbies, independent learning, whatever. And then I would also just give a shout out to, there's this one website, it's called Gap Yearly. I recently discovered it, and I'll send it in the chat here for anyone to check out. And they actually have a list of alumni mentors. So these are students who have taken gap years and have made themselves available to answer any questions within 48 hours of a student reaching out to them. And I think that's really helpful because there's just tons of different experiences. All the mentors have like short profiles on the website, and it was cool to like look through and see all the different types of things that students were doing just to get ideas. And then it does have that option to reach out individually. So that's a great place to start, in my opinion.
Excellent. Well, maybe to close things out on a fun note, I'm curious, where would you go geographically if you were going to travel in the fall? Chloe?
Where would I go? Gosh, I'm a Greek American. I have a lot of family in Greece that I miss dearly, and would love to go. So I would definitely go to Greece, and then I have a lot of friends in Israel too. So I'd hop back and forth and eat a lot of really good food and lay out on the beach. Sounds like fun right now.
Sarah?
Oh, my list is long. Let's see. Where would I want to go? Top places I've always wanted to go. I've done a good bit of travel in Asia and Europe. I never made it to Japan, and I'd love to go to Japan. I love Japanese culture. I love, so much about Japan, and a number of my students have been in the past few years, and I've really been jealous of their experiences and what they've learned. Another place high on my list is Egypt. I've always wanted to go and explore and learn more about Egyptian culture, and visit the pyramids. Has always been high on my list. So I'm going to say either Japan or Egypt would be where I would be headed.
I would definitely go back to Brazil. I've been a bunch, and I cannot get enough of it. But then I also would like to go back to Indonesia and explore independently, since I was there the first time with the program.
Excellent. Well, I think that closes it out. Answered a bunch of questions. We covered quite a bit of ground today. And again, I just wanted to thank Chloe, Sarah, and Emily for hopping in on this call and kind of discussing all of the opportunities that are available outside of the classroom, even in the crazy times that we're living in. So this is definitely something we'll be looking into more, talking about more, and maybe even launching and designing a little program or some partnerships out of it.